Imagine September 1st, 1939 arrives and nothing happens. No tanks cross into Poland, no air raid sirens, no newsreels announcing war, just a quiet Friday morning across Europe. In our real history, World War II killed somewhere between 70 and 85 million people. It remains the deadliest event in human history. But in this world, the spark never catches. Maybe an assassination attempt succeeds instead of failing. Maybe a treaty holds instead of collapsing. It doesn't matter how. What matters is what happens next. At first, almost nothing seems different. Fascist governments still exist. Tensions still simmer across Europe. Newspapers still argue about borders and armies. But there's no invasion to set everything in motion. Watch what unfolds over the next few years. The Great Depression never gets its emergency exit. In our history, wartime production dragged American unemployment down from 25% to almost nothing by 1944. Without that shock, recovery crawls instead of sprints. It takes over a decade longer to fully recover. Millions of factory jobs that once built tanks, ships, and bombers simply never open. Millions of women never get called into that workforce to fill them. The image of Rosie the Riveter, a symbol of an entire generation, never gets painted. Now push forward a few more years into the early 1940s. This is where it gets darker. Nazi Germany's persecution of Jewish people doesn't end because a war exposes it to the world. It continues, unresolved, inside a regime nobody forces to collapse. In our history, 6 million Jewish people were murdered in the Holocaust. In this timeline, the machinery of mass extermination built during wartime occupation never gets built at that same scale because there's no invasion, no occupation to enable it, but the persecution laws, the fear, the danger, none of that disappears either. It just keeps festering, unresolved, for years, maybe decades, longer than it should have. Push forward another decade into the late 1940s. No war means no Manhattan Project, no urgent government-funded race to split the atom before a rival power can. Nuclear weapons still get built, eventually, but quietly, by whichever government gets there first, with no deadline and no global audience watching. The world doesn't learn about atomic power all at once in two flashes over Japan. It learns slowly, nervously, without knowing exactly who has the bomb and who doesn't. No war also means no United Nations. The old League of Nations limps along, the same toothless organization that already failed to stop the aggression building through the 1930s. There's no Marshall Plan because there's nothing left to rebuild. There's no wave of new international law built specifically to stop this from happening again. And there's no reason for European empires to loosen their grip. In our history, the war bankrupted Britain and France, and by 1947, India had won its independence with dozens of nations across Africa and Asia following over the next 20 years. In this timeline, empires that once ruled a third of the planet stay intact for decades longer, still extracting resources, still governing millions of people without their consent. Now, picture daily life on the ground. A small town outside Warsaw. In our history, it was flattened by 1939. Here, it's just still there. Families are born, grow old, and die in houses that were never bombed. Grandparents who never existed in our timeline raise grandchildren who never existed either. Multiply that by tens of millions of people across Europe and Asia, and you start to see the shape of everything that changes. But here's the twist almost nobody expects. Without a war forcing scientists, engineers, and entire nations to collaborate under extreme pressure, technology doesn't leap forward. It crawls. No jet engines pushed from prototype to mass production in 5 years instead of 20. No wartime radar research quietly evolving into the first computers. No captured rocket programs racing each other toward orbit. The moon landing that happened in 1969 in our timeline might not happen until the 2000s in this one, if it happens at all. And fascism, left alone instead of crushed, doesn't just quietly fade away on its own. In pockets of this alternate world, it grows roots deeper than anyone expected. Decades later, a different, uglier reckoning becomes almost impossible to avoid. So here's the question worth sitting with. Our real history is soaked in almost unimaginable loss, 70 to 85 million lives, entire cities turned to ash, families erased from the historical record completely. But that same catastrophe also built the fragile scaffolding we still live inside today. The United Nations, the Geneva Conventions, the uneasy, imperfect idea that the world should never let something like this happen again. Take the war away and you don't just take away the horror, You take away the reason humanity ever built any of the guardrails meant to stop the next one. Maybe the darkest chapter in modern history is also the reason the world never fell into something even worse. And maybe that's the most uncomfortable what if of all.